Easter Island may have been first discovered over 5,000 years ago, though the oldest carbon dating is from about 300 AD. Most sites are near the ocean and would have been washed and destroyed by waves over the many hundreds and thousands of years that man may have been on the island. Did a cataclysm tidal wave bury the statues in mud and muck around 300 AD? It is known that Polynesia was settled many thousands of years before this. Humans have been on Tonga since before 1000 BC according to the dating of Lapita pottery found there. In his fascinating book, Mysteries of Easter Island, Francis Maziere explores the legends of the statues and the lost land of Hiva. Maziere was able to talk with a dying leper named Gabriel Varaveri, who was allegedly the last initiate of the secrets of Easter Island. Said Varaveri to Maziere, King Hotamachua came to Easter Island in 2 canoes. He landed at Hangaroa, but he gave the bay the name of Anakina, because it was the month of July. He notes that the winds from Polynesia to Easter Island blow in July and August. King Hotamachua's country was called Maori. In the Maori dialect of New Zealand, the word Maori means ordinary people, and it was on the continent of Hiva. The place where he lived was called Maririna. The king saw that the land was slowly sinking in the sea. The king therefore called all his people together, men, women, children and the aged, and he put them into 2 great canoes. The king saw that the disaster was at hand, and when the 2 canoes had reached the horizon he observed that the whole of the land had sunk, except for a small part called Maori. Says Maziere. The tradition is clear, there was a cataclysm, and it appears that this continent lay in the vast hinterland that reaches to the Tuamotu archipelago, what is largely today French Polynesia, to the northwest of Easter Island. Another legend, handed on by Oroviri Perotu, the last of the island's learned men, says this Easter Island was a much larger country, but because of the sins of its people Yuk tipped it up and broke it with a crowbar. Here too we have a cataclysm. A more important point is that according to tradition Salawai Gomez, an islet some 100 miles from Easter Island, was formerly part of it, and its name, Motu Motiro Hiva, means small island near Hiva. We have 3 signs pointing to this cataclysm. Yet generally accepted geology does not acknowledge any vast upheaval in this part of the world, at least not within the period of human existence. However, there are 2 recently discovered facts that make the possibility of a sunken continent seem reasonable. When the American submarine Nautilus made her voyage round the world, she called attention to the presence of an exceedingly lofty and still unidentified underwater peak close to Easter Island. And secondly, during his recent studies carried out for the Institute of Marine Resources and the University of California, Professor H.W. Menard not only speaks of an exceedingly important fracture zone in the neighborhood of Easter Island, a zone parallel to that of the Marquesas archipelago, but also of the discovery of an immense bank or ridge of sediment. Maziere's book came out in 1965 in France, 4 years before the revolutionary geological theory of tectonic plates changed geology forever. It was certainly true then, and seemingly so today, that geologists generally do not acknowledge a cataclysmic upheaval, or downheaval as the case may be, in this part of the world. Yet, Maziere sought to make sense out of the legends of the Easter Islanders. Were they just talk? Traditional anthropologists typically ignored the natives' own legends, and said that they came by way of Tahiti, possibly after some war, a few hundred years before Europeans first visited them. Such mysteries as Rongorongo writing and the incredible stone platform at Vanapu are ignored. Maziere favored the existence of an archipelago and even a long, thin continent extending south and north of Easter Island between the Marquesas Islands and the Galapagos Islands. Easter Island was the last peak, along with Salawai Gomez, of this former continent not rent beneath the sea by Yuk's crowbar. Apart from preserving the memory of these upheavals, tradition also states that King Hotamachua came from the west. Now in Easter Island on the Ahu'eshu there are 7 statues, and they are the only ones on the island that look towards the sea, and more exactly, the Western Sea. Their precise placing might well fix the area of the cataclysm, which would thus lie between the Marquesas and the Gambier Islands. It seems probable that during one of those suboceanic upheavals still so frequent in the zone between the Cordillera of the Andes and the New Hebrides, an archipelago, I do not presume to say a continent, may have sunk or been altered. Moreover, according to Professor Matroa's findings, it seems possible that King Hotomachua's men emigrated from this area of the Marquesas. The reasons for believing this are based on linguistics. The use of Hiva is an example and many points of ethnological agreement. The date of this migration, according to the genealogies that we collected, would be towards the end of the 12th century. This settlement in no way excludes the possibility of other contacts at far earlier periods, contacts that we shall speak of later. Mauzière then goes on to discuss the legend of 7 explorers first sent out to find the navel of the world and then to return and guide the 2 giant canoes to safety on Rapa Nui. He finds it odd that in the Marquesas, where some of the islands actually have the name of Hiva in them, there is really no legend of a sunken continent. He then says that the footless, handless old leper Verivari told him of a legend he had learned that the island was inhabited already when Hotomachua came by very big men, but not giants, who lived on the island well before the coming of Hotomachua. It seems very clear to me that this is a legend, based on a great deal of analogy and mythos. It also seems to have some basis in fact. There is one level of Hiva being an allegory for a spirit world where one goes upon transition, much as that of Hawaii. On the other hand, the legend seems to be of a physical place, an ancient homeland that went down in a catastrophe. Is this event then the actual sinking of some island mass many thousands of years ago? Or, rather, is it the final subsidence, perhaps only a few thousand years ago, of the last large area that remained above the surface? Mauzière seems to think that the last remnants of this land, called Davis Land, sank as late as the 1600s. In his book he proposed a long landmass that stretched from Easter Island to the Baja California Peninsula in Mexico.